Thank you all for joining this morning for our second day of our virtual Lead Academy. With us this morning, we have Miss Amy Ressler. She is the County Extension Agent in Montgomery County, and Scott Moore, Conroe ISD Board Member. Today, they're going to be presenting to you guys a session about servant leadership with your head, heart, hands, and health. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Ressler and Mr. Moore so they can get started.
Good morning. So my name is Amy Ressler. As Jenna said, I'm County Extension Agent for Family and Community Health here in Montgomery County. Actually worked for Extension for 27 years, so lots of experience with 4-H and Extension work. I have with me my good friend and classmate. So Scott and I are actually both working on our PhDs at Our Lady of the Lake University, so in leadership studies. So when this opportunity for the Lead Academy came up, we wanted to share some of the things that we've learned with you all. So that's why we wanted to work on servant leadership today, and then later on this afternoon, we're going to talk about transformational leadership. So Scott, introduce yourself.
Sure. So I'm Scott Moore. I am a Conroe ISD board member. I attended 10 graduations last week in Montgomery County and watched over 4,000 kids walk across the stage. And I've raised 3 teenagers myself. Been working with Amy for several years now in different volunteer capacities in Montgomery County. And my real day job is as a church leadership and security consultant. I work with churches and nonprofits developing security protocols and working with their ministry alignment and their leadership.
All right, so we're going to just get on to it. I'm going to share my screen, and we are going to talk about servant leadership. Here. All right, hopefully everybody can see that. So servant leadership with your hands, head, heart, hands, and health. So the 4 H's basically is what we're looking at. As we mentioned, I'm Amy Ressler, this is Scott Moore. So today's presentation, we are going to talk about servant leadership. Like I said, we hear a lot about servant leadership, but you know, what is servant leadership really? Because there's a lot of information. We'll talk about this later. But we want to focus on the research base of servant leadership and give participants the opportunity to assess your own leadership strengths and so that you can better lead, again, with your 4 H's. So if you will, in the text chat, if you can share what your definition of leadership is, when you think about leadership, what do you think it is? Because one of the things obviously we've learned a lot about is that there are a lot of different definitions of leadership. So like I said in the chat box, if you'll just go ahead and put in those and we'll read through some. But in the meantime, I'm going to tell you what my definition is. So I feel like leadership is recognizing potential in people and situations and then creating opportunities for positive change.
Yeah, and for me, it's exerting influence and working with members. A leader is not just directing and giving orders, but using the influence they have in an organization and working with the members of that organization to achieve goals that are mutually beneficial to all parties. A leader should never be just looking out for themselves, but considering what is best for the organization and what is best for the people that are following them. So we looked up, just literal dictionary definitions using Merriam-Webster. Leadership is the capacity to lead, and for those of you that are still in school, don't follow Merriam-Webster's example there. It's never good to use the root word of your word to define it. So the capacity to lead doesn't tell us a whole lot about leadership, but to lead means to direct on a course or in a direction.
So looking at the chat box, some of the things that I see for servant leadership. Someone says my mom is doing that, and I don't know if that's something else or if that's servant leadership, but definitely parents do a lot of servant leadership. And we'll talk about this a little bit later too, but even in terms of leadership, there's a lot of different ways people can lead, and sometimes it's your own life, your own family, and that is totally legitimate leadership. And using leadership skills in that capacity is definitely helpful. Role model, setting a positive example and helping others reach their full potential. I really love the idea of potential. I think potential is it's an interesting and almost dangerous thing. I think of it sometimes like it's like this beautifully wrapped gift, right? So the outside looks great, there's a lot of potential, but you have to figure out what's inside of that box, and what you decide to do with that box is really where the power lies. So you know, you could, sometimes we say people fail to reach their potential, so they don't make the most of that beautiful gift that they've been given. But I know that everybody in 4-H has that great opportunity to reach more. All right, so helping others succeed, leading others in a positive direction, often with others. So definitely that's a big part of servant leadership. Let's see, being an example for the youngers, standing up in rougher times when others will not. Oh my goodness, what did I do on the screen? So leadership is empowering others to become better than you ever were. I like that. Because sometimes we think as a leader that we have to be the best. Again, we'll talk about that a little bit more in detail. Setting an example. Leadership is a way to be the person, to be one of the people you look up to. A trait that means that you are to ensure everything is going well and planning to make sure that it does. Leading an army of 4-Hers, setting good examples, making good decisions, teaching and helping, and not, in capital letters, not bossing. Serving others.
There's definitely a difference in a boss and a leader. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And also the difference in just managing and leading.
Absolutely.
Not bossing, being able to organize, take charge, teaching younger kids how to be a leader or a role model. Leadership is a good example to others and being there to help them when needed. Role model, setting positive examples. All right, so we've got some great definitions there. So let's just get a little bit more into servant leadership. All right, so why even study leadership? So sometimes we get the idea that leadership is reserved just for certain people, and actually in one of the very first theories of leadership is the great person theory, and that was the idea that that certain people were meant to be leaders. They're just a great person, so they're a great leader. Throughout time and study, we figured out that that's not true. Anybody can actually be a leader.
Right, and it doesn't just happen. There actually is. You'll see in these next bullet points. There is a science to it. There is research. There are actually skills that you can learn. Certain people may be born with certain personality traits or certain behaviors and things that kind of draw people to them. That doesn't automatically make them a leader. It's actually something that you study and that you implement with intention.
Yes, and there really is a science to it. So anything that can be done can be studied, and so it's studied and researched. And so, when we talk about leadership, there are like thousands and thousands of books out there about leadership. Not all of them are necessarily research-based. A lot of them are just theories and ideas. And the idea of science is that we study those theories and ideas, and we see if they're true, if our results can be replicated. So whenever you are considering basically any kind of theory or idea, look at the research behind it. But even with leadership, look at has it been researched, has it been tested, or is it just a good idea?
It's not something that's always taught in college courses. We're fortunate, Amy and I are fortunate enough that we have found a doctoral program that is specifically geared towards research of leadership. When you get ready to go apply for jobs, particularly when you get out into the professional world, you'll see on job postings that they're looking for a servant leader or or you'll go to work for somebody and they'll talk about transformational leadership and they have absolutely no idea what that really is. They're just kind of buzzwords that are thrown around, but there is academic research based around the theory of servant leadership, around the theory of transformational leadership. And so sitting through a management course, something like that, is not necessarily going to teach you true leadership.
Right. And then also it takes practice and intent. So just like there's not only certain people who can be leaders, it's not like you learn a little bit about leadership and then all of a sudden you're a great leader. It's a continual learning process. So you have to be purposeful about your leadership and practice that over and over, learn new things, and then apply those new things that you've learned.
And everyone is a leader. We saw that in some of those comments that came in at the beginning about your definition of leadership. You know, you can be a leader in your family. You can be a leader in your school. You don't have to be the principal leader of a school. Students are leaders within their own schools. Family members are leaders with in their own families. 4-H members are leaders in their own chapter, in their own communities. So everyone is a leader of something. You exert some kind of influence and have some say and draw over other people.
All right, so let's look at what is servant leadership. Again, going back to just dictionary definitions, one that serves others, duh, but what does serve mean? There's a lot of different definitions of serve, but our favorite is to be worthy of resilience or trust. All right, so we want to know, what does leadership mean to you? So if you have access online right now, if you will go to menti.com, use the code 58879, and then we'll want you to enter 3 words that represent what you think of when you think of servant leadership.
Amy, some of them missed the code, they said.
Okay, 58879.
Also, there is someone in the session that is drawing on the screen. Can y'all please stop that? That's very disrespectful and distractive to our participants. Also, Amy, is there a way we can put the chat or the link in the chat for Menti? Oh, there it is at the top. Just menti.com is where I'll post it in there now.
All right, so we'll just give you a few minutes as you're working on this. You'll see how words come up. I'm liking these. Confidence, supportive, respect, loving, helpful, inclusive.
I think inclusive is very important. Just looking at current events and what we're facing in our country right now, an inclusive leader is vital, regardless of what organization you're talking about.
Supportive, unselfish. Definitely be a servant. Understanding, loving. Mentor.
Mentor.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that one. Yeah, while y'all are putting those up, we're sitting in Amy's office right now, and I'm kind of looking across the room at a sign that says, "True leaders don't create followers, they create more leaders," and that goes towards that mentorship.
Definitely. And the way this word cloud works, the more often something is mentioned, the larger it shows up on our word cloud. So it's looking like supportive and caring and unselfish, confidence, all of those are what several of us feel are very important. Ooh, knowledgeable, empowering, respectful, trustworthy, good examples. All right, I'm loving these. I'm gonna go back to our PowerPoint. Okay, so when we talk about servant leadership, there are a lot of researchers who have looked at servant leadership, and this is a little different, I think, than some of the other leadership theories that are out there. Usually there's just a, like a core group. But so Robert Greenleaf first started talking about servant leadership back in the 1970s. Now, when he started putting that idea out there, it really was just an idea or a theory. It wasn't researched just a whole lot until we got into the late 1990s. And then up until the 2000s, it's just like the interest started skyrocketing, and obviously the research did as well. So there's a lot of different researchers who have a lot to say. So we're going to focus though on, today we'll focus on this one by Bendirendak and Nugent. Robert K. Greenleaf.
Yeah, so as she mentioned, he began the research into servant leadership back in the 70s. And we've got a couple of quotes there that are attributed to him from his writings. The servant leader is a servant first. It begins with the natural feeling that one wants to serve first. So as I mentioned, there's a difference in bossing someone and leading them. There's a difference in managing someone and leading them. And to Greenleaf, at the core of leading others was serving them, having the conscious choice and the aspiration to lead. It's very different than somebody who is a leader first. And we see this so often. You can just pick a sector of business, politics, whatever. You see leaders who are out for themselves first, who are advancing their own causes, where a true servant leader is not concerned about themselves first, but about the other people that are following them.
Yes. So another thing that Robert Greenleaf had, his credo, and I think this is really important in terms of when we think about servant leadership and how it's different. So it's all about caring for people. The more able, the people who have more, and the people who have less, actually serving each other, and that's the rock upon which a good society is built. And so then, he kind of poses this to always ask this question: what is the effect on the least privileged in society? And will they benefit, or at least not be further deprived? So whatever we do, are we doing that better for others? And did we mention that Scott's a pastor? And this one actually makes me think of the verse.
Yeah, well, we speak of the least, the last, and the lost within the religious realm. And that's always at the forefront to do no harm. You'll see that in the medical profession, you see that in the religious world, you see that in societal relations, where our primary goal is to do no harm to other people.
And I think too, that verse, when you do this into the least of,
the least, yeah, when you have done this to me, you've done this to the least of me, you've done this to me. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so I said we were going to focus on the research by Bendirendak and Nugent. It's one of the more recent theories that are out there. The measurement instrument that is used, so like I said, with research and with science, it's really important to be able to measure things. And so the servant leadership survey is what these researchers came up with. And the constructs that it measures are these 10 that you see here. So we're going to go in more detail about each one of those now.
Yeah, so with empowerment, as we mentioned several times, it's about serving others. And I mentioned that quote that I was looking at here on Amy's wall: true leaders don't create followers, they create more leaders. If you're a leader in an organization and there is a task or something that needs to be done and you're the only one that can do it, you're not a leader. It's about giving agency and empowering other people to succeed at their fullest potential.
And I think a lot of this is what we do in 4-H, teaching others so that they can be better with their projects, so that people just do better. And another thing that this makes me think of too is the idea that if you want something done right, you have to do it yourself. That is not what empowerment is about at all. Really what this says, if you want to do something right, you teach others how to also do that right, so that we can all be doing it right together. Right, accountability is the other one.
Yeah, so holding people accountable for the performance that they can control. A lot of times you will see people who are in leadership positions, but they're actually just bossing, and they're actually just managing. And they're trying to hold people accountable for things that are completely out of their control. hold somebody in one sector of the business responsible for something that somebody else in another sector controls. And that's not accountability. When you're trying to make people responsible for something that's completely out of their control, that's not accountability at all.
And I think about all the challenges that we have now. So, you know, I guess social media, that's kind of one of the ways you get people involved in things, is you have a challenge. Hopefully it's a good, positive challenge. Right. But that's a form of accountability.
So standing back, the extent to which a leader gives priority to the interest of others first and gives them the necessary supports and credits. So I think of this as leading from beside, or maybe even leading from behind. As a leader, you don't have to be the one out trailblazing, showing the way, but you can be beside people or even behind them, letting them lead and just giving them encouragement from the background.
And I think this is also related to that idea of empowerment, because, you know, if you ask somebody else to do something, you need to just stand back and let them do it, and don't try to get in and, you know, do it for them.
Yeah, humility. This is a difficult one for a lot of leaders. Once you are identified as a leader and you get name recognition within or without your organization, it's easy for some people to fall into the trap of hogging that limelight and enjoying the attention that quote unquote leadership brings them. But a true leader is humble. They're not in it for their own glorification and their own edification.
Most definitely. And the other thing that I try to keep in mind too is that no matter who you meet at any time, they know something that you don't know. It can be
absolutely
someone who seems like they don't have any education, or just maybe has not had the advantages that you've had, but that person still has something to teach you.
And authenticity, being your true self. As a leader, you don't want to put on a false front to make people think that you're something or someone that you're not. That is in no way true leadership. An authentic leader is not afraid to show who they really are, and that even means acknowledging where you're weak and where you have some growing edges, and not being afraid to acknowledge that there are other people that have things to teach you.
Yes, definitely. And another one of my favorite theories, which we could do a presentation on at some point, is authentic leadership. And I think that that's a really important concept, and I think it's a very needed concept. I think authenticity is one of the things we're lacking.
I would just like to offer some encouragement here. You know, 4-H is a leadership program, and I personally have seen a lot of my peers from school and people that I work with now who have come through leadership programs like 4-H. And as an elected politician, I see this all the time in other people, where you want to present an image to the public to get yourself elected, or to get you within the business to get yourself promoted. That never works out well. Don't be afraid to let people know who you really are and where you really stand on topics, even if it's not the popular way to go. Be your true inner self and let the way that you live your life and the image you present to other people be what you truly feel inside.
And I think another important part of authenticity too is questioning what you believe and what you learn, so that you know that you truly believe it because you believe it, not because someone else told you to believe it. So don't be afraid to question, change your mind, learn, grow. 4-H grows. All right, interpersonal acceptance.
Interpersonal acceptance. You have to be able to understand other people. This is empathy and not just sympathy. This is being able to identify with other people and the situation, the social location in which they find themselves, and being able to truly connect with them and understand what they are bringing to the table and the benefits that their unique perspectives have.
And I think too, it's accepting some of that authenticity. So accepting who you are. And then I think there's an important part, the last little part of this, about you let go of perceived wrongdoing and you don't carry a grudge into the next situation, because that's kind of hard to do sometimes as humans. Like we just, you know, well, they did this and they did that, and we just want to hold on to that. But part of acceptance is just accepting it and moving on.
And courage. Leadership definitely takes courage. As the screen says, having the daring to take risks and try new approaches to old problems. And you'll actually see this in a lot of different leadership theories. You come back, we'll talk about that a little bit during transformational leadership and encouraging others to have the courage to step outside and to think outside the box and not get confined to one specific way of thinking.
Yes. And, you know, we sometimes think that, you know, I want to rule the world. If, you know, if I could just rule the world, everything would be great, right? You know, leadership is really, people don't always like leaders because they often challenge ideas and thoughts, and they, you know, encourage you to do more and to be better than you are. And so that sounds good and positive, but change is really hard and people don't like to change. And so if you have a leader who is challenging people to change, some people will respond very negatively to that. So it takes a lot of courage to be able to stand up for that, to stand up for what's right. Again, to challenge, to take risk and to challenge the old way of thinking and create new solutions. And I just love this picture. I don't even know what it is in that picture that, you know, the kids are looking at, but it, you know, a little scary, but still it takes courage to face scary things.
One of the things you'll hear in a lot of organizations is we've never done it that way before.
Yes.
We can't do that because that's not the way we've ever done it. And a courageous leader has to be willing to say, yeah, how's that worked for us so far? We've still got the same old problem. Mm-hmm. Let's try to come up with something new and be brave and bold and try something new. Yes. Yeah, stewardship. This one just kind of hits me in feels. I mean, I feel this one so deep. Coming out of the world that I do, taking care and responsibility for what has been given to you, being a good steward of other people's time, other people's feelings, the gifts that have been given to you. Amy talked earlier about this present, you know, take what is given to you, the fact that you have opportunities to learn through 4-H and to experience leadership in your schools and in your homes and in your clubs and in your community, but to be a good steward of what has been given to you.
Right. And so one of the words that came up on our word cloud earlier was selflessness. So stewardship is taking the things that you have and instead of controlling it and only in your own self-interest and only how it's going to benefit you, you do what you can to help benefit others.
Yeah, you know, we mentioned I'm a school board member. The official term for a school board is the Board of Trustees. We are not the Board of Education. We are not a Board of Directors. We are not a Board of Advisors. We are a Board of Trustees because the community has placed their trust in us to be stewards of their tax dollars and of their children. And that is how, that's where the term comes from, is we hold other people's best interests in trust and act accordingly.
All right, so we mentioned that was one theory. So Van Dierendak and Newton is what they came up with, but there are a lot of other terms that are related to servant leadership. So, you know, here's just a few of these. And as we were doing our word cloud earlier, I saw several of these come up. You know, and so helping people grow, I think about, you know, our logo, our motto for 4-H, 4-H grows. It's all about helping people grow. So it's
healing. Our world needs a lot of healing right now. Absolutely.
True. A lot about, there's emotional healing there again. There's more about stewardship, forming relationships. So servant leadership is a lot about relationships. And, you know, of course, any kind of leadership is really about relationship between the leader and the follower. We'll talk about that more with transformational leadership as well, based on relationships. There's one there at the bottom about, say it.
Covenantal.
Covenantal. So it's as in making a covenant with someone. So a covenant or a promise between people that we're going to work together for the good of all.
Yeah, setting an example, encouraging. We saw that come up on the word cloud. Trust. We saw that come up on service. Responsible morality. I love that one. Transcendental spirituality. These are just different ways of saying some of the things that we've already talked about, but being your true self and having a true moral compass and not being afraid to show where that compass is leading you. And then, as we'll discuss at the end a little bit, spirituality does play into the idea of servant leadership, and that's not religiosity, that is but a spiritual, overall, more encompassing spiritual aspect.
So I was thinking too, a lot of self-awareness that you mentioned. So one of the classes that we're taking this semester is on the history of leadership, and we read like a whole book. It was on becoming a leader. Yes. And it really focused a lot on the idea of self-awareness. So understanding yourself helps you be a better leader. More?
Yeah, valuing people, setting an example. We saw that come up on the word cloud as well. Trust and honesty. If people don't believe that you have their best interests at heart, they are not going to follow you as a leader.
Right. So there are a few terms or a few ideas that are unique to servant leadership that are very different from, or not very different, but they are just unique to servant leadership as opposed to other types of leadership. It sort of sets it apart. So yeah. You mentioned spirituality.
So I mentioned spirituality. Greenleaf, who was the original researcher in this area, was working on fully developing this idea when he passed away. But the idea is that kind of encompasses all of servant leadership is that we are a part of something greater than ourselves. And it's not tied to a specific religion or a specific faith tradition, but this idea that that we exist as part of an organization, as part of a system that is larger than ourselves and that is not tangible. That's more than just the day-to-day shaking hands, hi, how you doing, signing checks, entering stuff into the computer relationships, but there's a deeper something that connects all of us.
Right, which is kind of the same idea with altruism. So that's the idea that there's things that are more important than just you. We mentioned healing a little bit earlier. We talked a lot about empowerment and stewardship, and the building community is another important part of stewardship.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is really building community. That's probably other than school, one of the ways that Amy and I have connected and become friends is through community service together, through what the Extension Service offers in service to the community and bringing together different players. Amy brought me in because of my connections that I was doing at the time in disaster relief and addressing some social issues in the community and working on the school board. But you know, 4-H and the Extension Service are just masters at building community.
All right, I think that that's one of the most wonderful things about the 4-H program is that, you know, 4-H is a community of young people, you know, making the world a better place. So, all right, so we did a word cloud earlier. Here's a servant leadership word cloud that we came up with that kind of, you know, has all of those ideas there. Just wanted to share that with you. And so an example of servant leadership. So as we, this is about a 2-minute video. As we play this, so this is the clip from Charlotte's Web. And you know, the whole story of Charlotte's Web actually has a lot of servant leadership analogies in it. So as we go through this, if you will, in your chat, in the chat box, just talk about a few things where you see servant leadership happening.
Charlotte, look how happy she is. Isn't that great?
Yes, it's wonderful.
Hey, what's that?
It's my magnum opus.
What's a magnet opus?
Magnum opus. It means great work. It's a nutrient-filled, waterproof eggs.
Really? There's eggs in there?
My babies. 514 of them.
Wow! With 514 baby spiders all over the place, it's going to be really radiant in the barn.
Wilbur, I'm afraid they're not going to make it back to the barn.
What? What are you talking about? You're not going to leave them here alone, are you?
I have no choice. I'm languishing.
What does that mean?
It means I'm dying.
What? You can't die.
We're born, we live, and when our time comes, we die. It's just the natural cycle of life.
No, just climb down. I'll carry you the rest of the way. We'll go back to the barn and I'll take care of you.
No, Wilbur. I don't even have the strength to climb down.
So much for me.
And it was my great pleasure.
Please come down, Charlotte. Please, there must be something I can do.
No, Wilbur. Don't you know what you've already done? You made me your friend. And in doing so, you made a spider beautiful to everyone in that barn.
I didn't do anything, Charlotte. You did it all.
No, my webs were no miracle, Wilbur. I was only describing what I saw. The miracle is you.
All right, so just a couple of things that came up in the text chat was sacrifice, and then empathy, kindness. Charlotte served Wilbur throughout his youth, and now he wants to serve her, which I do think is awesome. So she kind of taught and empowered Wilbur to be a servant leader himself. Service and empathy, encouraging others. She shows them how to care, encouraging him to be better and to go on and be better. And then I also think too, just her little exec that she created, she was also being a servant leader for her children because she was doing what she could to protect them. Did you see other examples in there?
You know, they covered most of what I saw there. I mean, that was that was a relationship, and you saw community building in there. With the friendships that they formed, they were both looking out for each other's, what they thought was each other's best interest, and placing others above themselves. So
another one that I liked was that when she told Wilbur that he made people see a spider as beautiful. I mean, sometimes there's certain things that we don't see beauty in right away, but a servant leader helps us see how that's important and helpful, and you know, to see beauty in people and their spirit, and not just outward appearances.
right.
All right. So now at this point, we'd like to talk about, you know, how can you use your head, your heart, your hands, and your health to be a servant leader? So these are just some kind of things that we thought of. So, you know, using your head, obviously, you know, think through things, be aware of your feelings, the biases that you have, and then think about the perspectives of others, because in order to serve others, we also need to understand where they're coming from. You know, heart, all about love.
Absolutely. That's you know, the source of your empathy and your caring, placing others above yourself, wanting to see not just yourself succeed, but see other people succeed, see your organization succeed, see the world become a better place. All comes from the heart.
And I think the head and the heart too both relate kind of to emotional intelligence, which is another one great area that we could talk a lot about. And I know that one of the sessions later, Christy Tietzman is doing, and some of that is related to emotional intelligence and understanding your personality style and how that works with other people. A lot of that is understanding emotional intelligence. So hands.
Man, tear down the walls, you know. When you find yourself or your organization or whatever trapped in a box, you know, get out there and get to work and tear down those barriers that are preventing you from succeeding, preventing others from succeeding, and that are separating people in general.
And then with health, manage your wellness, encourage the health and wellness of others. You've heard the saying, you can't pour from an empty cup. You know, when you fly on an airplane, when we get to fly on airplanes again, you know, the oxygen mask, you have to put on your oxygen mask first and then help others. It's important for you to be healthy so that you can also help other people be healthy and encourage their health and wellness as well.
Yeah, and honestly, I mean, we'll just be real with you. Being a leader can be draining. And if you're not taking care of yourself, you're not going to be a leader for very long.
This is true. All right. So now we want to open it up to you. Questions, comments, ideas, anything that you would like to share about servant leadership. And Jana, I think we talked about if someone wants to ask a question, they could raise their hand or they could put it in chat. So we just want to open it up for questions at this point. So just see a chat comment. Charlotte's Web was so sad. It was sad. But yeah, but like I said, it does have some good lessons. All right. So one of the questions, what are some ways to begin teaching younger kiddos about leadership?
Yeah, so the first way is by being an example of leader. If you are one of the older students, by being that positive example, and by not being afraid to talk to those younger kids and to get to know them as people. You know, if you're a senior and you're looking at a junior high kid, don't look at them as a junior high kid. Look at them as, you know, as a fellow human being. Get to know them, get to know their interests, get to know what it is that drives them and is their passion. And that's really the heart of servant leadership, is that relationship building with other people. And we mentioned at the very beginning, you know, everybody is in some type of leadership, and that leadership may be simply because you are an older student, and there are people that look up to you simply because you're in high school or because you're an adult volunteer or something like that. So model those ideas of empathy and of serving others and of building relationships with the younger people.
So another question, how can we be a better leader than we are right now?
Oh, everybody can learn constantly. You want to go back to the first H with your head. Start by reading and studying leadership. You know, find a leader that you admire, whether that's somebody you know personally or whether that's a dead president, somebody that you admire for the way that they lead or the way that they led, and study what they did and how they did it.
And I too, I think with both of these, you have to start somewhere. So start small. Lots of times we think leadership has to be these big, monumental, life-changing kinds of things, but really just making a small difference in, you know, somebody's life and somebody's day. And so what we do in 4-H a lot is, you know, maybe we have kids volunteer to lead the pledge, which is a great way to start building confidence, you know, and I think 4-H is generally a really safe environment to be able to step out and do some things that make us uncomfortable. But, you know, just continuing to try to do that. Because leadership, sometimes, like we mentioned before, it takes courage. It can be uncomfortable sometimes. So sometimes it's getting outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah, and I think those small steps are very important. I'm glad that Amy brought that up. I didn't start as a school board member in a district with 65,000 students. I started in high school as an officer in the band. I started in junior high being involved in leadership in my church. And as an adult, I volunteered with the PTO at my kids' school, and then I helped them start a new program for dads. And then they asked me to serve on some district level committees. And I didn't just go from 0 to 100. I had all of these little benchmark growing opportunities as a leader starting at a very young age.
So also I saw, is it possible to be a leader when people think they don't need a leader?
Absolutely. people are not always going to acknowledge their own needs, and they're not always going to acknowledge the gifts that you bring to the table. So it is absolutely possible, and I'm going to suspect that everybody that's watching this right now, you're a leader in something, whether you know it or not. And the way to become a better leader is to figure out what makes a good leader and to try to develop those skills. But it is absolutely 100% possible. It happens every day that you're a leader for people who don't think they need a leader.
And then there was another one kind of related to that, is about people who don't see themselves as a leader or don't want to be a leader. How can you help them with this?
You don't want to push people too far. Give them those small opportunities first. If there's somebody that maybe you see leadership potential in, whether it's in your club, whether it's in your community, your school, whatever, you know, offer them the opportunities to lead the pledge, to offer opening remarks before your club, to hand out ribbons to award winners when your club's doing a year-end banquet, something like that. Just those little opportunities for people to develop confidence within themselves. And I keep saying this, model good leadership for them so they see what it looks like, and they may not even realize they're learning leadership. And
sometimes it doesn't happen right away either. I mean, we sort of think, well, they've seen how it's supposed to be, so why don't people just pick up and do that? There's a lot of psychology to leadership, to leaders and followers, and so working through all that can take some time. So, you know, don't expect instant results. It's a very slow process. There was another question about if you're leading a group, some are kind of moving slower, some are moving faster. How do you manage that whole group?
Maybe find some other leaders within the organization. If you've got a group that, Empowerment, absolutely. Take somebody from that group that's moving faster and use them as a mentor, as a coach for that group that's moving a little bit slower. You're recognizing skill sets across the board. This is part of that whole servant leadership, that relationship building, acknowledging where other people are. Not calling out the ones that are moving slower. You don't want to do that and bring attention, but it's a great opportunity for you to use some of those people that are moving faster or that are exhibiting some leadership skills, start them off as a mentor with that other group.
Do you see people abuse power with their position by picking on smaller people?
Watch the news. I'll leave it at that.
And so also I think too, part of being a leader is doing what you can control. So we talked about, you know, wherever you can lead there, start there with what you can do. There's a lot of things in politics, in our country, that we cannot control. So try to focus on what you can control and make small differences, and those small differences tend to add up and hopefully large differences.
And have the courage to call out people that you see that are harming others. If a leader is picking on people smaller than them, if they're abusing their power, if they're abusing their position of leadership, don't be afraid to call them out on it, because that in itself is being a leader.
Yes, and there's a lot of really good things in the group, in the chat too. So you know, make sure that you're looking at that as well. What's a good way to talk to people who you see are looking for leadership for themselves? And so I'm not sure if this means if you feel like they're abusing power, or if you feel like someone's got some of that leadership potential and they're just not taking it. So in that case, when you see, I think everybody has leadership potential, and sometimes it just needs to be encouraged. And so sometimes it just needs to be someone saying, giving them the opportunity, asking them to lead something, or asking them to lead with you, to co-lead something.
Absolutely.
So a good way to talk to people you see looking for leadership for themselves. So like if they're only in it to be a leader because of the glory,
have that conversation with them that that's not leadership. That's emotional bullying, really. Maybe refer them to Greenleaf's book. You might want to read this. See what you get out of it.
And you know, in today's society, reading books is, I mean, we still read books, but there's a lot more available, like short, I'm thinking of TED Talks.
Mm-hmm.
TED Talks are a great way. And so anybody who knows me, I'm a huge fan of Brene Brown, and she has a TED Talk about vulnerability that really kind of talks a lot about all of this, and I think it relates to just living a better life, but also it can help with leadership as well. And she has a whole book on, it's called Dare to Lead, which I highly recommend. But you know, if books are overwhelming to begin with, starting with some TED Talks could be helpful as well. She's got some podcasts.
Yeah,
kind of thing.
and it's very important we're back to the whole relationship building thing as well, and understanding other people, because that's key in knowing how to talk to someone. I've raised 3 boys. They're all completely different in personality and the way that they respond. And part of what I had to do as a parent, you know, I've got one son that it's best for me to just sit him down and look him in the eye and deal with him directly and say, I see this, you need to do this. You know, he responds much better to direct intervention. I have another child that's much more sensitive to feedback like that. And so I've had to learn to be a little gentler and a little more nuanced and persuasive in my approach and leading in my family. Any leader needs to be able to identify the different people that they're having that relationship with and figure out what one person responds to better than another.
Yes. We've got some really great conversation going on here. And I think there's still a lot of questions. There will always be questions, again, as you're learning and growing. And I think part of it, too, is just having conversations. I mean, some of the things that I'm seeing in here is just the need to have more conversation. And I think that a lot of what servant leadership is about, going back to Greenleaf's credo of those that are less able, helping those that are more able, and learning from each other. And I think that that's a good starting point. And like we said, there's not like, you know, this PowerPoint today, and we can share this. It's not like this is going to be something that's just going to, you know, change your life and you're going to go forth and be this awesome leader now, but it'll help you take a step forward. And I think that's the most important thing, is to keep taking steps forward. Yeah,
leadership is definitely a journey. I mean, I'd love to be able to say that, you know, I could teach you 3 skills and you could put them in your toolbox and pull all 3 of them out for any circumstances. It'll work.
If only.
But leaders are constantly evolving and constantly bettering themselves and finding new ways to better the lives of other people around them. So I would say maybe that's one key takeaway I'd like for everybody to have today, is that this is a journey and not a destination. Leadership is a constant evolving journey.
Yes. So my email and Scott's email is there on the screen. You know, feel free to email us if you'd like to discuss more, or if there's any way we can help or just share more information. We're more than happy to do it.
Point you to resources, whatever we can do.
Yep. And we're going to be back at 3 p.m. We're doing a presentation on transformational leadership, which is similar but different. So same, but different from servant leadership. So hopefully we'll see some of you all there, but thank you so much for spending your time with us today.
Amy, Scott, we greatly appreciate the words of wisdom today. We are about to move on to our next session, which is called Welcome to the Real World. For those of you on this session, if you will go ahead and jump off and relog back in so that we can let our presenters into the room and get them ready to go. That session will start in about 5 minutes. Thank y'all very much. Hope everybody checked in, and enjoy the rest of the afternoon.
Thank y'all.